Welcome to Paraben's E3 platform. I wanted to show you some of the capabilities associated with doing triage in E3, and so I'm going to start with doing some quick mobile devices. One of the nice things is you have the ability to navigate to a variety of pieces of evidence, and you're all still in one interface. So I'm going to focus on the acquire device option. I can name my case. Cases are automatically named for you to make it easy. Once I've named my case, it's going to allow me to go through and decide what I want to do. The acquisition wizard comes up, and one of the nice things I have is that anything that's currently connected to my machine at the time that I start the acquisition wizard will come up as options to acquire. So in this case, I have portable devices that are attached. I have an Android. It's seeing the feature phone side of that Android because it has a modem attached to it, and then it's also seeing an Apple. We have the unique function inside the E3 platform to be able to acquire as many devices as we have ports available to us. In this case, on my particular laptop, I only have 2 available ports at this time, so it's seeing 2 primary devices, both an Apple and an Android. When I want to process them, all I have to do is select that device. I have different options associated with that acquisition. If I'm doing triage and I have a limited amount of time, the nice thing is I have a custom acquisition which allows me to select what I want to acquire from the device, or by default I can go through and do the basics of just a full logical acquisition. Once that's started, all I have to do is it connects to my device to do the acquisition is I can start another acquisition through the same wizard, and you'll note that this time the Apple device is grayed out because the acquisition's already going. So I would do my Android acquisition. With my Android acquisition, one of the nice things we have is we have a very unique functionality again that is special to the E3 platform, which allows me to do an activity timeline. You unlock the file system, remove any passwords, and then the first option it has is that activity timeline that I mentioned. This is the perfect information for triage because it allows you to go through, and I'm going to multitask a little bit, and capture everything the user's actively been doing on the device. And it goes for a long period. So we've been able to capture this data for up to 3 months, and it gets it down to the second of what the user was doing. With that being the case, that's wonderful in the triage aspect because if it's something involved in a vehicular incident or it's something involved in something of a communication in a very specific time, I'm going to activate this option to do the activity timeline. I immediately can capture that information. The best part of it is that the user itself cannot change this information on the device, but it tells you whether or not the user is interacting with it or it's the device making those decisions without the user. So you can actually tell who is behind the actions on the device. Once I complete that activity timeline, which you saw is very quick, I'm actually acquiring my personal device right now, you'll see that it starts going into the main acquisition of the device. If I wanted to do the user activity timeline with a custom acquisition option where I just wanted to acquire SMS, recovered SMS, MMS, and apps, I could have focused that way and done the acquisition with that methodology. This is just a quick overview of the acquisition functions. Once my acquisitions were complete, I loaded up some different data just to be able to let you see it. So we have a couple different options that automatically occur whenever we acquire a device. And you'll see here we have the mobile data triage. This allows me to see some of the basic information associated with the device right up front. So I can see the different details for subscriber information, does it have a SIM card, what version of the firmware, external storage capabilities, etc. All of this is available to me right quickly from the start. I also get to see a list of all the installed applications that they had on the device, since most of us will use applications to store our data. So we quickly get to triage that information as well. And it goes through and continues with information such as the ICE email accounts, locations that they hit, and recent web searches that they did. That's the basics of the mobile triage. One of the other capabilities that we like to talk about is some of the cloud triage. So there's a couple ways you can cloud triage a device. We do it as part of the acquisition process, so we can see things such as authentication data. That authentication data can then be processed back at the lab with a simple export of those keys, and then it allows us to go through and import those, and so I don't have to do that in the field. If I did want to do data in the field and I have consent of my suspect that's involved, all I have to do is pick that cloud import. I select what type of account I want to do with them. So if they have their Alexa credentials, Facebook, any of the G Suite credentials, iCloud, or Twitter, I can go through, log in, put their password, authenticate, and immediately image that data. When we image that data, it comes into the device acquisition, as I've done here. And now I have a full representation very quickly, as cloud imaging is minutes. It is not a long period of time at all of the cloud information associated with their Facebook account, as in my example here, or with their Gmail, or even their Twitter account. All of that can be imaged in less than 15 minutes. Usually it's less than 5 minutes to image most of it, even a very full account. And I brought down. The only requirement, of course, for cloud triage is that you have to have internet access to be able to authenticate into the cloud. There are other cloud capabilities in the E3 platform. One of those capabilities is, of course, importing data from Office 365, as that's become one of the most common mail platforms available out there. So being able to triage that information is very important. And that email can come in directly into the tool where I can have access to their full account by imaging directly out of the Office 365 system. One of the last things I want to show you on the mobile triage side is that user activity timeline. That activity timeline comes in as a separate node here, and then the information is broken out for you to review. I'm going to open my case instead of my sample case, and I'm just going to close this one real quick. And let me open my case here. So here is my user activity timeline, which makes sense. We had 4,000 different activities that had occurred in the process. And then you can see it broken up by what is happening today that I've done so far. It's all down by the second. I don't use my phone every minute, but you can tell I've used Skype on the device. I've accessed the Android system. Let me expand the interface just to make it a little easier for you to see. Because one of the important things that you want to review is not only the internal activity name, but you see this command that says move to background, move to foreground, or none. That's whether or not the user has actually interacted with the device. So it was myself that chose to have Skype come up where I chose to have the icon be pushed, and I moved it to the foreground so I could review what was happening in Skype. Versus something automatically happening with the device that says, oh wait, there were Skype notifications I did not open, and they have moved to background associated with them. So you can see all of that information for quite some time. For my device, this timeline goes back to October 1st. And that's because, of course, I'm very active on my device and I'm putting in a lot of data all the time. I'm also testing it often. So we see a lot of that information in there. But you'll even see when they're going into messaging versus using their phone. When they're accessing, you'll see me accessing some of the IoT systems that are in my home on here, and so on and so forth, versus the Android system being accessed at the time. So it's a perfect example there of those options showing up, and something unique that you get with the E3 platform associated with data triage. The final section in data triage is associated with computer imaging. Now, computer imaging, we look at it differently. Obviously, we're not going to do it directly in the E3 platform because you want to provide people different options based on being able to boot up a computer and still be able to do true forensics. So we have a bootable thumb drive that can deploy in this field. It's called DP2C. This allows you to go through and either create an image, which is our traditional forensic image. We've always done DD images, which makes them so that they're easy to read no matter what type of tool you're doing, so it's great for cross-validation. You can do scans associated with it, or you can do a custom scan so you know you're looking for particular types of data. And all of those different types of data, it allows you to scan for them and then capture them individually. If I want to do a quick scan, it will go through and scan my machine and then be able to tell you what type of information it's found that is associated with it. So it's found an email database, which makes sense. I have my email on here. It has browser data, and it has documents found in the My Documents folder. If I wanted to then continue, I could go through and say, hey, I want to pick up this pieces of information and then be able to add those into my image. And it will image it, and then I can open that image inside the E3 platform. One of the nice things is it does have a lot of those automated triage options, because as drives have grown exponentially, being able to acquire all of them in the field when you're doing a triage has become increasingly difficult. All I would do at this point is attach a drive to it, and I can acquire that data out and just select the acquire button. Once we have gone through and acquired all the different pieces of information based on that triage stage, it's time to do the collection stage. In the collection stage, this is really where we can kind of get into some of the more enhanced functions, such as your file system analysis, which I'm going to show you what I actually do with that now versus what I used to do. Originally, when I started doing forensics, I wanted to go through and immediately process everything. So now, before I actually process it, I triage the drive. So I'm going to just auto-detect my image because I have a Windows 10 image that I wanted to process for you. I'm just going to add the first of my segmented image in. It's going to auto-detect it. It's a Windows 10 image. Instead of selecting any of these file system processing functions, I'm actually going to just hit OK, because I can always go back and do that. And I'm just going to choose to triage that evidence. So I've added about 130 gig image here, and you'll see I have the root system here, but then you'll see I have this data triage functionality, and I want you to see how quickly I can do a data triage associated with this image. It's actually already done. So I know within this image that I've provided for you, I have email database, I have a chat database, I have browser data, I have 3 items in the My Documents media, I have Windows search and communication. This is an interesting one because it's one that I had to adjust for as technology has evolved, and we see the speech command here. If I click on this, I'm looking at the Windows 10 artifacts associated with Cortana. So my suspect has been using and searching with Cortana using the voice commands, and I have all that information recoverable for me here in the search or in the triage function associated with Windows search and communication. I also know they were connected to the cloud. In this case, they were connected to OneDrive, and then I have the different windows and apps that they've selected because it's Windows 10. The other side of it that I really like is that you can triage into the registry, which I think the registry is somewhat ignored a lot of the times associated with triage, but it has a lot of really great information. So I get to see anything from the programs they have to the connections they were done, who was logged into the system at a given time, and then who the different users of this system were. So if it's Amber's machine, it's Karen's machine, it's Bob's machine, I get to see all that user information here and who was the last one that was logged on. All of that in triage, which tells me when I go into the lab, do I have everything I need to do? Did I get enough information out of that file system? And what do I want to have them process once it goes to that lab stage? Once it goes to the lab stage, whenever we do anything from computers to mobiles, we have a content analysis wizard that allows us to sort the data into categories that we've defined with headers. We also have the ability to do that disk analysis associated with any of the file system. And then we can decide what we want to skip as known data, because there is a known file system data in here. And then I also have the option to be able to choose to do enhanced image analysis capabilities, different things like that if I choose to license that, because we have an AI engine that we work with a third party on that can be licensed into the tool that allows you to pick up illicit content, weapons, drugs, etc. It takes a little bit of time to scan all those images to do it out into the different categories, but the nice thing is that it has very low false positives. Once I hit finish, that data immediately starts processing, and because my tool is threaded, it will go through and start running these tasks down here, and we can see things like our sorted file categories will start to fill in with one another, but I can still go through and work with this data while it's filling in. So I'm not losing anything, and the collection side, I'm still able to multitask through the process. So our final stage of the process is the review stage, and what we've done is we've taken the exact same interface and we've actually just changed the licensing mechanism in it so it has limited access controls. That way a lab and a review investigator, someone who might be actually doing the casework associated with it, can still use the same tools, have the same capabilities, but we've limited out a couple things associated with it. And you'll note that the things that are grayed out here are the ability to add lots of new evidence. That way they're only working on existing case data. So if I chose add evidence or open case, I'm actually going to get very similar information here, because you'll see that I only have a limited access to either a forensic container, which is a way that you can triage data into an acquisition file, or the ability to open an existing acquisition case and that data. So I have one of those here on my desktop, which I can open here. I will actually open the cloud data. It's going to open that cloud data that I've already been processed and acquired from the scene. So I've already done my triage, and you'll see that content analysis wizard, which allows me to choose what I want to have done. If I would have chosen to open a case file and the scene would have given me, or the lab would have given me, a case file and an acquisition file, I could have opened that and all of these functions would have already been selected by the lab. So I hit finish, and you'll see over here that it's the similar data that we had before, which is the Facebook, the Gmail, and the Twitter, but I didn't choose to acquire it. I can't pull up and add more data from the cloud, but all of my analytic functions here are available to me. So if I want to search it, I can do an advanced search, I can do a sorted file search, I can do the content analysis wizard again, and the nice thing is then I can also do all of my reporting, because I'm the investigator on the case, and I can go through and make the detailed information that I want for the report that would then go off to the attorneys involved in the case, etc. So I have a couple different options associated with it. The other thing that we have that comes into the review stage, which is what this stage is we've built in here for a save as archive. That allows people in the lab to be able to collect all the information they've done in the processing of the evidence and put it all together in a zip file that contains the case file, the acquisition file, and indexing that they might have already performed on it, to share that with an investigator in the field, and then they can use the E3 viewer license. You can see what I'm licensed for up here, to be able to just open that and immediately start going, and most of those administrative decisions have been made for me. In addition, we give out the other review tool, and we give this one complimentary, which is Paraben's Link to. This is designed specifically for mobile evidence. As you can see, I have a phone loaded in here, and it shows some of the communication that has happened on the device. I can go through and look at contacts, calls, etc. in a link form. And the nice thing is I can add multiple cases in. So if we have 3 to 4 suspects and we want to look at all the communications between their phones, all I have to do is add that case data from those other phones, and it will do the link analysis for them. It will pull up statistics associated with it, or it can do a quick timeline. This is a single phone, so it doesn't make too much details associated with a timeline. But then I can see them interacting with one another, and we offer this free to our Paraben customers. Overall, those are your reviews of what you can do with the capabilities of the E3 platform directly in relation to the triage process to make it as easy as possible to be able to process the maximum amount of data from mobile devices, computers, cloud, all the way from the collection stage to the lab processing stage, and then down to the review stage where someone can go through and start going through the nitty-gritty details associated with it. Thank you very much for your time.